Hey, tomorrow we have our test over Unit 9, which is all about geometry. Be careful when you see triangles. There's several triangle problems on the test, and they're about three very different things. And so this one right here is talking about triangle angles. If you need a refresher on that, you can find it on page 50 in your notebook. On page 50, we learned that the angles of a triangle always add up to 180 degrees. So in this problem, they've given us two of the angles, and we're looking for this third one. We don't know what that one is. That's why they have it labeled as X. So when we have two that are given to us, we go ahead and add those together. Because this one has a decimal point in it, we need to be careful. We want to make sure we're lining up our decimal points. So we can write 80 as 80.0. That's the same thing as 80. When I add those together, that's going to give me 112.8. Then once we've added those together, we still have to subtract from 180. Again, we need to line up our decimal points, so make sure that you make it 180.0. We can't take 8 away from 0, so we have to borrow. And that gives me 67.2, which is answer choice J. Answer choice H, notice that's above 180. If all three of them together equal 180, there's no way that one of them alone is going to be 200 and something. So make sure you're not picking anything that doesn't make sense. Question number 2 is an area problem. And since it's talking about a trapezoid, we need to make sure we're using the trapezoid formula. You can find this on page 54 in your notebook. And the formula is base 1 plus base 2 times the height divided by 2. Our bases are these two right here. So that's going to be 6 plus 8.5. Our height, remember our height is always straight up and down. So we don't want to be using this one over here because that's a side. We want to be using the 4. Okay, so remember if you can add 6 plus 8, then you can just add the 0.5 on the end. So 6 plus 8 is 14. So that's going to be 14.5. If you need to write it out, just make sure that you make the 6 into 6.0 because you have to line up your decimal points. So again, that's going to give us 14.5. And then we leave our height and then the divided by 2. Now I need to do the multiplication. So 14.5 times 4. So 4 times 5 is 20, 4 times 4 is 16, plus 2 is 18, and then 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Don't forget that if there's a decimal in the problem, there needs to be a decimal in the answer, so that part gives me 58. And then we have to do 58 divided by 2. Sometimes you can do the dividing by 2 mentally, but if you can't, you need to make sure you go off to the side and actually divide it out. So 2 goes into 5 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. We subtract, we bring down, 2 goes into 18 9 times. I ran out of room there, but we've got our answer. It's 29, and it's going to be square centimeters since it's area. Remember, area is always in square units. Okay, that was problem number 2. Let's look at problem number 3. It's a picture of a rectangle, and it starts out by saying rectangle, but make sure you're reading the problem carefully because it says that it's cut to form a triangle, and we want to know the area of the triangle. So again, we have a triangle problem, but because this time it's talking about area, you're going to find that on page 53 in your notebook. It's a little hard to see these numbers, but we've got a 12, a 13, and a 5. So we need to be using the area formula. Area equals base times height divided by 2. So if we're looking at the triangle, you can either, the two triangles are the same, so you can either say, okay, this is 5 over here, this is also going to be 12, because those two are the same, these two are the same. Or you could just flip it upside down, and the 12 they gave you is the base, and the 5 is the height. Just make sure you're not using that 13, because the 13 is a slanted side. We don't want to be using that. So the base, we said, was 12. The height is 5. 12 times 5 gives me 60. Notice 60 is an answer choice. So if you just did base times height because you read rectangle or you forgot the triangle formula, you might be tempted to pick H, but it's not because we have to still divide by 2. 60 divided by 2 is 30, and it was inches, so that's going to be 30 square inches. Okay, question number 2 is about area of a parallelogram, but this one's different because notice they already gave us the area. That's the area. We know the base. We're looking for the height this time. We're not looking for the area. So the formula is area equals base times height. You can find problems like this on page 55 in your notebook. So remember, we're going to plug in the known values. We know the area, so we want to put that where area is. We also know the base, so we want to put that where the base goes. We're going to leave h for the height because we don't know what it is yet. That's what we're trying to figure out. Now we solve using our inverse operation of division because we see multiplication in the equation, so we have to divide both sides by 9. These 9s are going to cancel out, leaving just h, which is what we're looking for. Now we just have to do 57.6 divided by 9. 9 can't go into 5, but it can go into 57 6 times. 9 times 6 is 54. We subtracting it 3, and I bring down my 6. 9 goes into 36 4 times. So that tells us that the height is 6.4. So we work backwards on problems like that. Okay, Janie had 3 straws that were 5 inches, 2 inches, and 3 inches long. Could she form a triangle using these straws? Why or why not? So again, we have another triangle problem, but this is, again, a different type. And so this can be found on page 51 because it's talking about the sides of a triangle. And on page 51, I taught you the strategy small plus medium has to be greater than large. So we take our smallest one, which was 2, plus our medium one, which was 3, and it's supposed to be greater than our largest one, which was 5. 2 plus 3 is 5. And then we ask ourselves, is 5 greater than 5? And that is not true. So the answer is no, she could not form a triangle because 2 plus 3 is not greater than 5. If it was greater than 5, then she could have formed a triangle. Okay, number 6, write an equation. So we're not actually finding the area. We're just writing an equation to find the area. And it has a hint here that we're just using the formula. So remember when we write these equations, we're going to use the formula that's on the star chart. So instead of the divided by 2, we're going to keep that 1/2. So 1/2 base 1 plus base 2 times the height. Then we plug in what we know. So we know the bases are 5 and 12. So where it says base 1 plus base 2, we would put in 5 plus 12. And then for the height, remember height is straight up and down. So that's x. If this is on the test, it's going to be multiple choice. And so they're probably going to have an answer that looks like that has y because it's using the side. So just be careful. Make sure you're using the correct things in the correct places of the formula. And you can find this also on page 55. Okay, it says, which of these figures has an area of 12.5 square centimeters? So area of rectangles and parallelograms is on page 52 in your notebooks. And so we're going to have to work out both of these. So I'm going to start with this parallelogram. The parallelogram formula is area equals base times height. The base of this parallelogram is 5. The height is 2.2. Be careful because you don't want to be using any slanted sides. Okay, so 2.2 times 5. We have 1 decimal place. So that's going to give me 11. That gives me 11 square centimeters. So I think it's probably going to be this rectangle, but let's double check because that was not what we were looking for. Area of a rectangle is also base times height. So the base of this rectangle is 2. The height is 6.25. So I'm going to come over to the side and work that out. 6.25 times 2. We have 2 decimal places. That gives me 12.50, but remember 12.50 is the same thing as 12.5. We don't need that, that extra 0 on the end. So the answer was this one right here gave us that area of 12.5 square centimeters. And then last but not least, you can find volume of rectangular prisms on page 56 in your notebook. Remember that the formula for volume on your chart, it's going to say volume equals big B times H. But remember, big B is length times width. So that's just length times width times height. And then we plug in those numbers. So the length here is 18.4. The width is 8. And the height is 11. Personally, I would go with these two whole numbers first because that's easier to multiply in my head. That means I'm only having to work one multiplication problem out to the side. If I start with 18.4 times 8, that's going to give me a decimal number, and then I'm going to have to multiply that times 11. So it's really just easiest to do the part I can do in my head, and then we can go over to the side and multiply 18.4 times 88. 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 8 is 64, plus 3 is 67. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 6 is 14. I put my placeholder 0. Because this is another 8, it's going to be the exact same numbers because it's going to equal all the exact same things. They're just pushed over 1 because of that placeholder 0. Okay, when I do that multiplication, I get this, but I have to remember there was a decimal in my problem. There has to be a decimal in my answer. So I got 1,619.2, and it's going to be cubic centimeters. Remember that volume is measured in cubic units. So that's what would go on the end of my answer. Okay, I hope that helped, and I hope you get ready for your test tomorrow and that you do great. Good luck.